Well, hello, Buster.
What's going on, Don?
Well, another beautiful day in Sautee Valley.
Hot one.
It's hot, but fall is in the air and leaves are turning even more, and it's getting to be the greatest time of year around here. We do have a special guest today, Mr. Emory Jones. And, I know you two know each other.
I've had the opportunity in the past to speak with Emory up at WRWH. Very well-spoken gentleman, local author, so he should be good with his words.
I don't know about that, but you did some fine editing to make me look good. I know that part.
I've known Emory for a number of years, and you know he's been away most of his life, but he's got roots here in White County. And tell us about that, Emory.
Well, I'm part of the Metters clan that make pottery. My mother was a Metters. My granddaddy was Wiley Metters. And his daddy was John Milton Metters, who started the pottery shop in 1892. So we've been here a while. I think showed up in the 1850 census anyway. I think we got here about 1840. But I grew up here and went to school in White County, and then moved to Atlanta. Shudder to think about that now.
What took you down to Atlanta?
Money, job. I tell you what, I went to, I was a state FFA officer. And back in the day, the state FFA officers all went to school at ABAC down at Tifton. It was just the thing to do. So all the other officers were going down there. So I followed them down there. At the end of 2 years, I had a grade point average of, I think, 1.6.
Wow.
And a draft lottery number of 34. So you add those two up. I wasn't that good at math, but I could figure out that I was going in the military one way or the other. So I joined the Air Force for 4 years and came back after that. Then went back to Georgia, and not bragging, but I had a grade point average there of 3.9 when I got out. Only difference was that I was 4 years older and, you know, a little more mature, I guess. I was too young to go to college. I shouldn't have left home when I was 18. But got a degree in ag journalism, and Gold Kiss was a farm co-op in Atlanta. And luckily I had the opportunity to, I really wanted to go to work for Progressive Farmer magazine. That was my dream. And I interviewed with them. They had a job opening, and I was going to have to move to Texas if I took it. But had made up my mind I would go to Texas. And this guy named Dale Dieterling came out, and he said, I've narrowed it down to two people, you and this other kid named Jack Odell. And I'm going to hire Jack. And so I was just devastated then because it was my dream. I wound up 4 years later working for their biggest competitor, Farm Journal magazine, which is more of a Midwest publication than a Southern, but I was a Southeastern editor. So even though I didn't work for Progressive Farmer, I got to work with them a lot and travel the same meetings and things like that. So that was kind of fun, but Gold Kiss was good. And then I went, after the Gold Kiss and Farm Journal experience, I went to an ad agency called Fletcher Mayo. It was the biggest agricultural agency in the country. They had Stetson hats and Case IH tractors and just about any ag account that was around. DuPont was a little bit of there. Union Carbide was a big company back then. Seed companies, and that was fun. I got to travel to all 50 states.
Ooh.
And it didn't just travel there. I got the sales rep pick me up, and we'd go visit farmers and other people, and I still get Christmas cards from people in North Dakota that I made friends with in different places. I actually carried some cotton seed up to North Dakota one time. So I think he's still planting it. You know, cotton will come back every year if you don't let it freeze out or cut it down. And so the last I heard a few years ago, he had a cotton plant that was 20 years old or 25 years old, something like that, in North Dakota. So people had a novelty up there to see cotton. But and then after about 20 years at ad agency, the second ad agency in Atlanta, moved back up here, and that was in 2000. It's been a long time now, but we had a cabin up here and a house in Atlanta, and the house in Atlanta was about 4,000 feet, which is, we only used 20% of the house. You know, it just happened to be that way. But the cabin up here was 800 square feet. So we moved 4,000 square foot house into an 800 square foot cabin. The plan was to sell the cabin and the house and build out at Mother's place on Mossy Creek or buy something up here. But we'd go out and look, and we'd do this. And the house in Atlanta sold like that. And we just couldn't bring ourselves to put the little cabin on the market. It's over on Yona Mountain, backs up to the National Forest, got a little stream going by the, And finally, it just dawned on us one day, this is where we want to be.
Yeah.
So we added on to the cabin a little bit and built a building. And Judy had an office in one end, and I've got an office in the other end. And that's home now. So I guess my next place will be the nursing home.
Now, you mentioned you're from the Metters family. What age did you realize you were better with a typewriter than you were with a pottery wheel?
I don't think I had been weaned yet at that point. I knew right off that I was not a potter. Granddaddy had a shop, and he quit making pottery in 1943. And right across the road was Cheever's shop, and so I grew up in the pottery industry. And my uncles all made pottery. Everybody I knew in my immediate family and extended family too were potters. I mean, they knew how. I just thought it was something everybody in the world did. I couldn't imagine somebody not knowing how to make pottery. But I would go try it, and it was like, ooh.
Your fingers don't work that way.
This hurt. It's like playing the guitar. I tried to take guitar lessons. I go, ooh, that hurts too, you know. But I didn't have much talent for that. But I don't know. I enjoyed being around pottery. I enjoy writing about pottery. I enjoy collecting pottery. I asked my wife; she's about tired of that. But I like everything about pottery except making it. I'm just not good at it. I can't even get past centering the ball of clay on the wheel, because that's if I could get that mastered, I just finally gave up. But
well, if it makes you feel any better, I wasn't very good at it either in school. No.
Well, I've always
wasn't very good at any aspect of art, really.
Yeah. Well, there was a lady in Claremont named Miss Lissy Payne, and Miss Payne was a very well-known artist in the area. And my mother made me go take art lessons from her when I was a little kid, 7 or 8 years old. And the thing I remember most about Miss Payne was that when I would get there, she would give me a tomato to eat. Well, now, a 6, 7-year-old boy does not want a tomato to eat when he goes to somebody's house. He wants some candy. He wants some, but I always had to eat my tomato before we started our, and I think that kind of turned me off. But you know, I go back and Mother saved some of those paintings that I did when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I think, you know, that kid had stuck with it. Maybe he could have been an artist of some sort. But too late now. I didn't stick with it. And I can do paint by numbers pretty good, but that's about all. But,
well, and since you've been back here, you've been really busy in writing and creating plays and a lot of things about our area. Tell us about all of that, Henry.
Well, I've always loved history, Don, and I know you're a history guy too. And there's so much history here. I know every county, every spot in the world has its own history. But there's something special about our history. It's just amazing. And I guess everybody feels that way about their history. But when I got back up here, because I'd always known Shirley McDonald, and Shirley was the unofficial historian, later made the official historian. But I got with Shirley, and we started talking history, and she would tell me things. I'd just ride around the county with her. And I just woke up one morning and had this idea. All my ideas always come in the morning. After 9 o'clock, I'm shot for the day, you know. But I woke up and I said, well, White County 101. Let's just, you know, for people that move here, don't know anything about the county. So we got together, we wrote this little book called White County 101. It took about 48 hours to write. But it was...
Books being generous.
Yeah, probably so, yeah. But I did this little picture and put on the cover of My White County, we call that. It's got all the areas. But this little thing, we came out, before we knew it, we sold 2,500 copies of this thing.
Wow.
I know, it was just amazing. On the back here, that's my donkey and my 3 cousins, Conrad and Lloyd and Charles Allison. Lloyd's the honey man, I don't care. But it says, in an early attempt at coping with the county's growing traffic congestion was a program called DARTA. Donkeys are really the answer. We never really caught on, but after that one, I looked around and we had a store called Yona Treasures down next to the Yonaburg between here and Cleveland. And people would come in that store, and I know, Don, you probably experience this every day up here, and ask some of the most bizarre questions that you have ever heard in your life. And a lot of these questions were about the Indian man. And do you know anything about that mound up there? And they would have their own story that they'd heard. One, would come in and one guy told me that it wasn't made by Indians at all. It was made by, it was part of the work program from the Depression years that they came in and then another guy came in and he said they excavated it and they found out that there was a tribe of giant Indians, 8 feet tall, and traced that story back and found out they did find a Indian not in the mound but a grave outside the mound of an Indian. The skeleton would indicate he was 6 feet 6 inches tall.
That's pretty big for
And
back then.
that's big, huge. Even though the Cherokee were kind of larger than a lot of the other tribes, that was an anomaly here. I mean, it'd still be pretty rare today to have someone that.
Kids getting a scholarship for sure.
So I decided, heck, I'm gonna write a book about that anyway. But my first love was photography. I always loved photography. I did a lot of photography in my work. I was fortunate to be able to do that. So I decided I was going to get my camera and set up on the fence post, and every day for 365 days I was going to take a picture. And so I said, yeah, that'll be great. It'll be a coffee table book. You'll see how the light changes. You'll see how the seasons change. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. And I told my wife about it, and she said, that's the stupidest idea you've ever come up with in your life. She said, you're not going to come off this mountain every day, and I'm not going to have a year where I can't travel because you got to stay here and take a picture tomorrow of the Indian man. And from the same spot. So she talked me out of it. She said, if you're going to write a book about it, write a book about it. Write a narrative. So I started interviewing people, Dr. Lumsden, Max White over at Piedmont. And the more I got into it, the more I found out I didn't know about the mound. So then I'm thinking, well, how do I illustrate this book? So I got the artists around here that John Collick and Becky Peoples and Nona Stevens and all these people that had painted it, and then Mildred Greer who'd written a poem about it, and I got all these people and I included them in the book and tell their story. What drew you to the mound? What made you want to paint the mound? What made you want to write a poem about the mound? What made you stop and take a picture of the mound? And I included their stories in the book, which also you could extrapolate from that some of the mound history. When people open this book up, the first thing they do is they want to go to the excavation. It's just amazing to watch people. Well, tell me about that excavation, which happened in 1915. And Dr. L.G. Hardman owned the land then, and he gave permission. There's a guy named H-E-Y-E. I call him Hay. Dr. Lumsden would yell at me every time I said Hay and said it's High. And I'm sure he knows more than me, but I still find myself saying the Hay Foundation, but it's probably the High Foundation. He was out of New York. He excavated Central and South America, out west, all kinds of places. And he came here, and so he had all these pictures, and he wrote a book that came out in 1918 about the excavation, which, by the way, he considered not important at all. And it was supposed to be a 2-year deal, and it rained that summer. Dr. Hardman he was a farmer first, and he had his cornfield out there, and they were messing up his corn, and he got tired of it, and you can imagine red mud everywhere. And so he told him to pack. Well, first he said, I'd like all the things you're finding, which he found fascinating. We'd like for you to leave this in the valley, and I'll build a building, and we'll have a little museum. And they said, no, our contract says it all goes back with us to New York. So he said, well, in that case, you won't work with me, I won't work with you. You pack it up and go home. So he sent them packing, and they didn't get to excavate the other side of the mound. They did the east side, but they never got to the west side. And it's interesting to note that one of the stories Dr. Lumsden told me, and Hyde mentions it in his book too, they did it in little sections like this. They didn't disturb the gazebo on top. It's still there. They did it in these sections. Well, the first night they had the first section across there, and they found the only piece of painted pottery they found in the whole excavation. And that night, some local boys went out playing on the mound, and they jumped. They had it covered up in a tarp, but they jumped on that tarp and broke that.
Oh, Lord.
It's the only piece of painted pottery they found. But they did find 75 burials. There wasn't any. It wasn't like all chiefs. There was men, women, some children, hundreds and hundreds of. He calls them bear tusk that they used to paint the pottery. It was probably bear claws, really, but it was fascinating what all they found in the thing. But they didn't get to the other side, so he had all these pictures that they had taken, and I tried to get them from the Smithsonian, and we never couldn't get them. It wasn't. They didn't say no. It was just government red tape. So finally, I gave up. The very next week after this book came out, they sent me 4 CDs of all these pictures.
Oh.
And since then, they have sent me another letter saying I can't use but a very few of those because they won't let you now print pictures that came from burial site. So it was but because we had those pictures, David Greer and I got together and we did a documentary on this, and we interviewed all the people that are in the book again. And I think the 1-hour documentary is probably better than the book, really.
I do find it kind of funny that some folks up in D.C. are saying that a local person can't use pictures of their local.
It's tough. It's tight. It's really, in the last few years, what you can and can't do with artifacts has really gotten very, very restricted. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you couldn't excavate that mound today, that's for sure. But I always wonder if, you guys may know more about this than me, but they have this ground penetrating radar now. I wonder if they could maybe look at the other side of that mound.
You would think so with technology that we have.
Yeah. They found lots and lots of pottery.
Have you ever actually been in the gazebo on the Indian Mound?
Oh, yeah. The last time I got out there on it was for this book. At that time, and it may have changed since then, but you had to be doing work on the mound. You had to get the state to say, yeah, he needs to be out there either to cut the weeds or to make a repair on the gazebo or something. So I had to volunteer to mow the grass on the mound to get out there. It was interesting the day that Paul Brown and I went out there. Paul did most of the mowing, and he and Mike Kaiser did that for years and years, just as volunteers. Well, I went out there with Paul, and I was taking pictures, and so cars would see me taking pictures, and they would honk the horn and stop. One guy at the historical marker, he actually stopped, got out, set up a camera, and started filming us out there on the mound. As long as I was weed eating, everybody was fine. They keep going by. People actually stopped on the road to Helen on 75 there and yelled out, "Get off the mound!" And so I thought we were going to be on the national news tonight, but nothing happened. But the gazebo, it's got little markers around the seats, not markers, but seats that you can sit. It goes up. It's decorated the same architectural style as the house, that Italianate. And at one time over there, you could see where they had steps going down the backside. There was some sort of a water feature over there. They had either a fountain or something. But there's one thing that's interesting about it is always a breeze going across that bay. I don't care how still it is anywhere else, there's a breeze. When I was a kid, I worked for Bradley Dorsey at Fonda Milling Company, and he always had the contract to cut the hay in that field. So we would, I remember looking out over that field, and about 10,000 square bales of hay that we had to get out sometime in the next 2 days, And one time there was a bunch of us boys that he'd hired that we worked with him to get the hay out. And usually when we helped Bradley with hay, we had hay all over the pasture, all over the county. If there was a stream nearby, and usually there was bottomland, so we'd strip off and get in the river and wash the hay, everything else. So this particular day was a Saturday, and Bradley's wife Sandra said, "If you boys will get that hay up before dark tonight, before it's supposed to rain tomorrow, I'll make you a thing of homemade ice cream and bring it to you." So, oh man, okay. So then we worked all afternoon and basically forgot it. And so we go strip off to our underwear and get out in the stream, and we're laying there letting the water and honk, honk, here's the horn. There's Brenda there with the ice cream. "Hey boys, I got your ice cream." And "Set it on the bank. We'll go away."
Don't come any closer.
So I was the one that volunteered. I had to go get the ice cream, and we all came out. And one of the most memorable memories. Can you have a memorable memory?
It's a double memory.
I'll never forget.
It's a really good one.
Laying in that river up there down by the mountain, tired after having put up all that many hundreds and hundreds of bales of hay, exhausted, itchy, scratchy, sitting there eating ice cream and let it wash off with the water, take it. Oh God, that was wonderful. Oh,
Now, you not only write nonfiction, but you write fiction as well, right?
I write a little fiction. The Valley Where They Danced. It's historical fiction, and it's set. It's a story. Actually, in 1980, I found a newspaper article written by a guy named Scoop Scruggs.
That's a neat name.
It is a neat name, isn't it? He was a reporter for the Gainesville paper for a while, and then the Atlanta paper for a little while too. But he had, in his story, he had come up to the valley here and interviewed this old lady, and the woman told him the story about this young doctor who had moved up here from the Macon area, and in his story and in the legend she told him, he married this young girl who turned out later, you find out at the end of Scoop's story, that it was the old woman's daughter.
Ooh.
And so the story goes that they got married and she died, and the doctor was just terribly distraught. He lived up this way towards on the Batesville Road somewhere behind the old Sautee store, and so they used to have parties all up and down the valley. These big old houses, they'd take the furniture out and set them on the outside, and they put sawdust down so people's feet would slide across the floor, and they'd have these parties, especially in the fall of the year, this time of year. So they convinced this doctor, who's still in mourning for his wife, to come to one of the parties. Well, he came to the party, but he didn't really like being there. And so he leaves early, and he's got this mare and his buggy, and he leaves early. And it's one of those big, huge full moons like we just had or about to have.
Mm-hmm.
And these boys are coon hunting up on Lynch Mountain, and they see the buggy come away, and they see him go to the cemetery. It's a private cemetery up this road here, and they see him go to the cemetery and park at her grave, and they don't pay any more attention. And then later they see the buggy leaving, only this time there's this ghostly woman in a bridal dress, wedding dress, sitting in this luminous dress, sitting in the seat beside him. And they watch him. They come running because they're just fascinated by this. According to the story, he goes to the old covered bridge up here.
Mm-hmm.
The horse goes in, and according to the boys, the horse goes berserk. Just have boom, 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 screaming, kicking. So then the horse runs out the other side, no doctor, no ghostly woman, just by itself. And according to the story, according to his story, the horse was, from that point on, it couldn't be used. It was crazy.
Oh.
And it ran back to his house. The doctor was never seen again. The community all gathered here at the old Sautee store, Williams store, I guess, back then.
Of course.
They all gathered here and brought the sheriff up from Cleveland, and they agreed that they would be laughed at. I mean, there were probably, 100 people living here then, maybe. And we'll be laughed at if we say this is a ghost story. So the sheriff agreed to just write it up, but he disappeared of his own accord. And that's what they did. But his family never believed it. And they all came and said, he's not the kind of guy who would do that. Well, for years after that, people said, oh, we saw the doctor in New York. We saw the doctor in South America. He was seen in Atlanta. But nobody ever proved anything. Whether the story's real or not, I don't even know. But I took that and made a book out of it. I changed the ending instead of having her die here, I had her things happen at Tallulah Gorge and Tallulah
Took
Falls.
some creative liberties.
Well, yeah, and I wanted, from a starkly commercial point of view, crudely, crassly, whatever, I wanted to expand the geography. Because if it's just set in White County, I mean, I expanded it to Raven County, expanded to Gainesville, you got a bigger Northeast Georgia story instead of White County. So I asked Dr. Lumsden, I said, you think it'd be okay if I changed the ending to let it end over at Tallulah Falls instead of here? And he said, it's a legend. You can do anything you want to with it. So I did that and came up with this book. And it's been, we sold over 6,000 copies of this. First we printed it hardback, We did 2,500, and they sold out pretty fast. And then we did it in softback. When I had hardback, everybody wanted softback. Now I only have softback, everybody wants hardback. So I don't know.
Well, Emory, you've got a tall stack of books here, and not to mention the plays you've written, and some of them about the books and some of them about other things. But tell us, and tell our audience here, how do you go about writing a book? What do you have to gear up in your mind to start writing a book?
That's a good question. And when you learn the answer to that, you'll make $1 million when you start telling people. But you know, the old story is writing is easy. You just sit down and stare at a blank piece of paper until little tiny drops of blood appear on your forehead. You know. I think first you got to have a story, and once you have a story, you got to accept a couple of things. And one is you're not the boss; the book is the boss. And when you sit down, and some people outline, I have never been able to outline and stick to it, because I write with the what if attitude. And the woman goes to that door. What if she changes her mind and runs in this direction? What if the door won't open? What if she opens it and then slams it really hard? What if she opens it and there's a dead body on the other side? Just because a woman walked up to the door doesn't mean she just got to open it and go in. You know, what if? You keep that what if with every little thing. The Stephen King wrote a book called Stephen King on Writing. One of the best books on writing. It's not like it's a regular book. Stephen King, it's just a book about how to write, how he does it, and his process. And he says the difference between a good writer and a mediocre writer and a good writer is that the good writer knows when he finishes the manuscript, he's just got started. You got to sit down and edit and change. I'll give you an example of that. This book, when I first finished, it was 135,000 words when I finished it. Well, I went down to a cabin over on Yellow Mountain down below us. There's no phone, no TV, nothing. And I spent about 3 days by myself in that cabin. I went home and slept at night, just right up the road. But and I cut the book from 135,000 words to 90,000 words. Best thing I ever did to that book. You just start. If it doesn't move the story along, get rid of it. And Stephen King also says, go back and kill your darlings. If there's something that's just so cute and you love it so much, get rid of it. And you mentioned plays. Now, we made a play out of this book, Valley Willie Danced, and it's been put on at SNCA and Piedmont. And I went over and talked to Kathy Blandon at the theater at Piedmont, head of the theater then. And I said, would you read this book and tell me if it can be a play? And she did. She said, yeah, it could be a great play. She said, how sensitive of a writer are you? And I said, I worked in public relations and advertising for 30 years. I mean, everything I wrote had to go by a product manager and an attorney. I mean, I have no sensitivity left whatsoever. And she said, well, you're going to have to cut it a lot. And she said, go through this book and come up with, I think it was 15 moments in the book that have got to be there to tell the story. Like when Tom and Lenore meet for the first time, they got to meet. They got to get married. You know, that's a moment. They got to have their dance on the Indian mound. That's a moment. So I asked me and I did it, and my wife did it, and I asked Billy Chisholm, who's the newspaper editor, to do it. Out of the 15 moments, we were only one off. All three of us had the same 15, so I knew it was pretty close. So I went back, and then the thing is, there's a character in here named Pledger Dorsey. He's my favorite character in the book. I fought kicking and screaming to keep Pledger in there, but I had to take him out. It hurt so bad. I mean, it was like you get attached to these people. You really do. Another thing I do is before I ever start writing a book, or if I introduce a new character, even if it's only one sentence about that character, because I might bring him back later. You know, I mean, who knows? I go and write a complete biography of that character. I write down in my mind when it was born, when they got married, whether they had typhoid fever when they were a kid, where they worked, what they did, what their education is, what their favorite book was. I write so I know this, and it helps you a lot because sometimes you'll have a couple getting married and you realize, well, you know, she's only 12 years old and he's 40, you know, and so but if you got their biography, you know exactly what age both of them. So you have appropriateness that's in there, and little things that maybe you don't even write it, but the reader will notice it. And I tried my hand just for the heck of it. I decided I wanted to write a children's book. My pig here, he's got a friend named Biscuit, so we did that. It's set up at the Hardman farm, and it's kind of a fun little book. But I decided it's easier to write a novel than it is a children's book. When you write this book, you can use every word you've ever heard or every word in the English language. When you use this book, you got about 3,000 words on the high side that you could use, or maybe even 1,000, because kids, and you're not supposed to use any words over 2 or 3 syllables. You know, the more 3 syllables is kind of the max. And then you got to pick your age group. Well, writing for a 4-year-old is different from writing for a 5-year-old. Writing for a 5-year-old is much different from writing from a 7-year-old. And so you got to be able to target that little thing, right? Which I think I kind of split the difference and did somewhere between 5 and 11, you know. But
Emory, we've covered a lot of ground, or you've covered a lot of ground today, but we've barely scratched the surface. And I hope because of that you will come back and join us again sometime on the Old Sautee Show, and bring your friend Cunningham when you do. We didn't get a lot out of him today, but we'd like to hear more from him.
he didn't say much, did he?
No, he was quiet today.
Well, before we go, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody young that's thinking about getting into this field, what would that piece of advice be?
Start writing. Don't worry about how good it is. Don't worry about what other people think about it. Just start writing, because you can sit and think about writing all day long, but until you start putting words on paper. Yeah. Well, a lot of people do that. And I think everybody's got a book in them. For certain, everybody's got a story in them. And just tell your story. And they say, write about what you know about. That's true, but you can also write about things you might not know about it now, but you can learn about it. And you know, write what moves you. Write, you know, if science fiction's your thing, write science fiction. If history is your thing, like me, write history. I just love historical fiction. I think that's because you got your set point facts, and then everything in between, you can kind of make up your own story within reason. But start writing. If you want to write, you got the urge to write,
Just do it.
just do it.
Rock on.
Well, Emory, thank you so much for coming and being on our show today.
Thanks for having me.
Keep writing, and we'll keep reading. So,
All right, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
and we hope to have Bill back next week. And Buster, hope you're feeling better. I sense you've got a little bit of some kind of a
My sinuses.
nasal thing going on with all that's flying around in the air, but hope you're feeling better. And we hope our audience will join us again on the Old Sautee Show soon. Get us out of here, Buster.
Rock on. For Don Allison, I'm Buster Talent. It's been the Old Sautee Show. Tell a friend. We'll see you next week.